All right, here I am back again. This is Dr. Hughes again, and we need to deal with the Census of Quirinius to round out everything I've said about the birth of Jesus in 2 BC. What I'm going to show is how well 2 BC works with this, even though there has been controversy over this and people try to make it more confusing than it really is. So we're talking about, again, the Census of Quirinius here, which I really should say that it's best to call it the Census of uh, Caesar Augustus, because the actual text of the Bible says in Luke 2, chapter 2, Luke chapter 2, verse 2, um, and 1. So, Luke chapter 2, 1 and 2, sorry. Now, in those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that a census be taken of all the inhabited earth. So, the primary thing here is Caesar Augustus is issuing this decree. This was the first census, the first, which I want to draw attention to in a little bit, but this was the first census taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. But the lead-in is in those days, the days of Jesus being born, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that a census be taken of all the inhabited earth. Therefore, Mary and Joseph end up being part of that census eventually, and right when she happens to be giving birth, so ends up in Bethlehem, where they're counted. So what are we talking about? What is the census of Caesar Augustus? Really is how we should put it. Quirinius is yes involved, but it's almost like Luke is thinking of that as an afterthought. His primary thought is this is the time when Caesar Augustus issued this decree. What decree are we talking about? We're going to get into that. As an afterthought, he's like, oh yeah, this is when Quirinius was governor of Syria the first time, almost like the first time he did a census, because we know Quirinius did a census in AD 6 and 7, which doesn't line up with any idea of when Jesus was born. So no one accepts that as the census that this could be talking about. But most interestingly, he says the first, like he's making a distinction from the later one in 6 and 7 AD that most people point to and say Luke must be confused. Well, he made a point to say the first is like as an afterthought to this. Like, by the way, Quirinius was around then too, and he was involved in this census, maybe learning the ropes of taking a census at the time, to do a little better job of it later on. And so I think that's why Luke kind of mentions it here, almost as a parenthesis on what he just said. So just to the perspective correct, I would say. So look at this. What was going on in 2 BC that could be this Caesar Augustus initiated decree? Well, everybody knows about this event. It's just historians never want to regard it as what Luke is talking about because they place the death of Herod in 4 BC. Therefore, the birth of Christ must be prior to that. So it can't be 2 BC when this is happening. But if you're going to take what I've shown already, where you have the birth of Christ in 2 BC, everything lines up, including this. It's just naturally what Luke's got to be talking about. It's when the entire Roman world declares Caesar Augustus Pater Patriae, which means father of the country. And so I really want to hit that home. That is what we're talking about. This decree of Augustus Caesar is what matters. And this decree is well known. And it lines up perfectly with 2 BC, the birth of Christ, as I've shown. So if you try to get the birth of Christ off on, prior to 4 BC, it's just a mess. None of the history lines up. And that's why people question the whole thing. But if you line it up correctly to what the church fathers have said, to what the biblical account says, multiple places, it's just making it very clear from the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar, which I've already talked about, when Jesus was baptized, when he was 30 years old. Subtract, 30 from that, and it's got to be 2 BC. I've already shown that. That's historical evidence, from the astronomical evidence, from prophetic evidence, from just doing the calculation of the prophecy in Daniel chapter 9, to other things that are happening, including this event. It makes absolute most sense that this all lines up to 2 BC for his birth. Not 3 BC, not any other place but 2 BC, which I've been showing. So that's why I wanted to talk about this, because it backs it up and it really clears up this idea of what this census was and could have been. So we know again that Caesar Augustus was declared father of the country. And even Caesar Augustus refers to this himself. Uh, since I brought that up, I'm going to say it here. This is from the pen of Augustus. While I was administering my 13th consulship, which translates to 2 BC, the Senate and the Equestrian Order and the entire Roman people gave me the title Father of my country. That inclusion there by Augustus himself and the entire Roman people, that is the census, that's the registration of allegiance to Caesar that was required by this declaration. This declaration took place in February of 2 BC. It kind of started even before that because they found some inscriptions of that, but it was made official in February of 2 BC when the Senate and the Equestrian Order and then the entire Roman people bestowed it upon him. And so Luke's talking about that. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that a census be taken of all the inhabited earth. That's an interesting phrase there, the inhabited earth. We're talking about Americas. We're talking about Australia. No, we're talking about the Roman understanding of the world they controlled, that the world they knew of. They didn't know about those other areas, so it's not talking about that. It's talking about what the people at the time understood as the inhabited earth, the Roman Empire, basically. That's what he's saying. Just like it says, the entire Roman people. That's what we're talking about. That's what Luke was talking about. And that's the first census of Quirinius, not the second that everybody knows about. It's the first that history doesn't really reveal other than this big event, you know? And then we're going to talk about who was controlling Syria at the time and how it could have been Quirinius, even though we don't have we don't yet have direct physical evidence of that or extra biblical Roman evidence of that. But we don't have, to say it now, we don't have Roman evidence of who was over Syria. It doesn't exist. No one knows who was over Syria. So in 2 and 3 BC at that time. So it very well could have been Quirinius for a very good reason, which I'll get into. But back to the declaration of the Pater Patria. So you have this decree go out in 2 BC, February 5th, and by the time it makes it to Judea, you have the summer of 2 BC. That would make sense to me, taking 6 months to make it all the way to all the provinces. And it could have been very well that Quirinius was overseeing that because of what we know about Quirinius' life. So first of all, no one knows of a Quirinius-led census in the BC era. We only know of it in 6 and 7 AD. We do know that Quirinius was quite the hero to the Romans in just prior to 6 BC when he had to put down this Homodanesian tribes that were causing trouble in Central and Southeastern Asia. So he led a war almost, but squashed them pretty quick to quell that rebellion. And he took control, basically, and brought peace and stability to Central and Southeastern Asia. And as a reward for that, he was made proconsul of Asia in 3 BC. And proconsul is just like someone who helps the consul, acting on behalf of a consul. And it's almost the same thing as what the Greek says in Luke 2:2 for Quirinius' role of governor, or it just uses this more general term than even governor, of hegemoneo, and that just means a position of leadership. Justin Martyr called him a procurator when he's functioning in this role of census overseer in Judea. That's Justin Martyr, a church father writing in the 2nd century, close to the time. So these guys knew of some things that maybe we don't have access to anymore. But we do know that Quirinius was made proconsul of Asia, almost as a reward, almost as a position of honor or promotion for having been so successful against this Homodanesian tribe rebellion of Central and Southeastern Asia. So that's a well-known fact that he was proconsul of Asia. What is also a well-known fact is we don't know who was governing Syria in 3 and 2 BC. We know who was for the years prior, but we don't know it for 3 and 2 BC. Um, there's no record. So almost like we should assume it's Quirinius because that's who was over that general Asian area anyway. So he may have actually been serving the role in maybe there was a void there, a gap of time, and he was just temporarily over that. And then he had to be kind of involved in all this counting of the Roman world of allegiance to Augustus. And so that's probably how he got involved. So Luke, thinking, oh, I remember he was involved in that census in 6 and 7 AD. But he was involved in this one too, maybe little known, but he was involved. So Luke kind of just throws it in there. The first census that he was involved in is how Luke had worded it. Just to review here. The first census taken, implying there's a second, which Luke knows of. It's the one in Acts. Let's see where do I have it there? Acts 5:37. There it is. So that's the one Luke even addresses. Luke knows of it. And there was even a little Jewish rebellion that Josephus talks about at that time because of it, because they didn't want to have to pay tribute. And so, again, Quirinius is kind of good at squashing rebellions, did it then. And he did it prior as well. So Luke knows of something in a little more detail, but we have a gap in our knowledge anyway of that time. So the only one filling it in is Luke for us. So it's not like there's some other guy that history tells us is over Syria, but Luke says it's Quirinius. That's not the case. No one knows who's over it in 2 and 3 BC. And that matches with when I'm placing the birth of Christ. So the point is that I'm trying to show is that everything lines up very well with 2 BC, even the census of Quirinius, and all the mystery and trouble and questions surrounding what is it kind of go away when you first recognize that it's Caesar Augustus. And the big thing going on in 2 BC when I have Christ being born is this declaration of father of the country for Caesar Augustus. And it lines up. So just to show all these things that are similar, all these similarities, all these things that kind of line up, I don't think are coincidental. We have good reason to believe Jesus was born in 2 BC. See other videos that I've done on this, and this is just kind of the final video in that little series I'm doing. This is at a time when we know that Caesar Augustus declared this, made this declaration. It's got to be the registration that led to a census in Judea. Luke tells us that a decree was going out. It's got to match this thing in 2 BC, which matches when Jesus must have been born, which would match with a 1 BC death of Herod the Great, which I've already shown. When you look at Josephus, right? See previous video. So all these things kind of line up. We know Quirinius was governing Asia. That's a well-known fact. We just don't know who was governing Syria, so probably him. And so this all lines up to placing the birth of Jesus in 2 BC around all these known events. So there's just too much, call it circumstantial evidence, but there's too much evidence to line it up to 2 BC, a birth of Jesus, which then places his death in 33 AD perfectly on a Friday. I mean, this is the only way to do it. And he's 33 and a half years old, just as implied by the book of John. So I just don't know how else to say it. It just lines up so well. And that's comparing John to Luke. Things said in Luke chapter 3 to what John shows. It just all the events of Jesus Christ's life line up when comparing and harmonizing the gospel accounts plus the historical accounts. And yes, there's a few gaps in our understanding from historical data, but a lot of it also is filled in. And so we have to make certain assumptions, but that's okay. Nothing's in direct conflict from history with what I'm showing you. So I think we've got it pretty well demonstrated that Jesus was born in 2 BC. And it lines up to everything else the Bible has to say, including the mysterious Census of Quirinius. So I think I'll leave it at that, and to be back, another time. But I'll be continuing to do videos on other things. I may go through a book of the Bible. I may get back to what I was doing a few years ago, harmonizing the Gospels. Probably get back to that. But I'll leave it at that. Hope I'm answering people's questions. If you have any thoughts on the matter, feel free to put it in the comments. Bye-bye.